What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about Hakeem Olajuwon, one of the most slept on players in NBA history. And I really don't know why Hakeem is slept on. Maybe it's because he played in the era that featured Michael Jordan, or the fact that he was sandwiched in between Kareem and Shaq, and he kind of got lost in the shuffle with all the other great centers of the 90s. Now, for whatever reason it is, I think Hakeem, he is heavily slept on when it comes to all-time rankings and just recognition in general. So in this video, I'm going to walk you guys through Hakeem's career and show you guys why I think he is one of the best players to ever play the game and the best center in my opinion. So Hakeem's career starts off in 1984 when he was taken with the #1 pick by the Houston Rockets, and the Rockets the previous year had taken 7'4" big man Ralph Sampson with the #1 pick, and it didn't take very long for Hakeem and Ralph to establish himself as one of the best young duos in the NBA, as it led the Rockets to 48 wins, and Hakeem averaged 20, 11, and 2, and became one of only 11 rookies to ever put up that kind of stat line. Now, in Hakeem's rookie year, the Rockets would be bounced in the first round, but the following year, 1986, the Rockets, they would have a very deep and very forgotten playoff run. And one of the most noteworthy and impressive series from Hakeem's career is that series in the Western Conference Finals versus the Showtime Lakers, who had won 62 games and were the heavy favorite to make it back to the NBA Finals. Now, even with Hakeem and the Rockets being heavy underdogs, they would actually upset the Lakers in only 5 games, and Hakeem held his own against the great Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was 38 years old. Now, you'll be saying Kareem, he was 38 years old and is way past his prime. That's not entirely true. That year, he finished 5th in MVP voting, and the previous year, he had won Finals MVP, playing absolutely spectacular versus the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals. And in the 1986 Finals, the Rockets would be matched up against that very same Boston Celtics team, and once again, the Rockets, they were heavy underdogs entering the NBA Finals. And Hakeem, he definitely did perform very well in these finals, but it didn't help that his co-star Ralph Sampson, he severely underperformed, and he kind of wilted under the pressure of the Boston Garden fans, and the Rockets were going to ultimately lose in only 6 games. And the sad thing about the 86 Rockets is that was the peak of the Hakeem and Sampson duo, and they were only 23 and 25 years old, but Ralph Sampson the following year, in 1987, he would miss 39 games due to various injuries, and that would plague him for the rest of his career, as he was never really healthy and never really back to his old Ralph Sampson form. Now, with Sampson missing the majority of the 1987 season, the Rockets would go 42 and 40 and be very disappointing as they lost in the second round. And Hakeem simply did not have enough help or enough stability to make a deep playoff run. And for the next 5 seasons, that would be a theme of Hakeem's career, not having enough help and not having stability in the front office and with all the role players and the players that surrounded him on his team. Now, during this 5-year stretch, the Rockets, they would have 4 straight first-round exits that would culminate in them missing the playoffs in 1992. And as usual, when a superstar is putting up huge numbers but the team is not winning, that leads to the fans questioning whether he was actually a championship caliber player. But luckily for Hakeem, that would all change in 1993 as the Rockets, they would re-sign Reed Tomjanovich, who had taken over as the interim head coach in 1992. They would also draft Robert Horry, who would be an integral piece of their future championship teams, and they would continue to develop young players like Kenny Smith and Vernon Maxwell. And with this added help, the 93 Rockets, they would go 55 and 27, and Hakeem, who did his normal Hakeem stuff, averaging 26, 13, 4, and 4, and he would finish 2nd MVP voting and 1st in the Defensive Player of the Year voting. And entering the playoffs, hopes were high the Rockets could make the NBA Finals again, and the first round, it actually looked like that was going to be in danger. They were taken to 5 games by the Sacramento Kings, and in that elimination game 5, Hakeem would be absolutely amazing, having 31, 21, 7 blocks, 3 steals, and 3 assists, and the Rockets would advance to the second round to play the Seattle Supersonics that featured Gary Payton, Sam Perkins, and Shawn Kemp. Now, much like their first round series versus the Kings, the Sonics, they would give Houston all they could handle, and the series would go 7 games. Now, in this game 7, Hakeem put up 23, 17, and 9, but down the stretch, there were 3 very controversial calls that could have gone either way, and that would ultimately lead to Houston being eliminated in 7 games by the Sonics. Now, there's no way to know if that bitter ending motivated Hakeem Olajuwon for the very next year, but it definitely looked like it did, as the very next season, Hakeem, he would be absolutely dominant, winning MVP and Defensive Player of the Year, and being selected to the First Team All-NBA and First Team All-Defense, and he's actually one of only 2 players to win the MVP and the Defensive Player of the Year in the same season. And the Rockets are going to win 58 games, setting themselves up for another impressive playoff run. And their first round matchup was the Portland Trailblazers, and they handled them fairly easily, beating them 3 games to 1. But in the second round, they'll be matched up against Charles Barkley's Phoenix Suns, who had made the NBA Finals the year previous. In this series, it was back and forth, and it ultimately went 7 games. And once again, Hakeem, he would step up big time in Game 7, having 37 points, 17 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 blocks. And the Rockets would advance to the Western Conference Finals, when they matched up against the Utah Jazz, who they would handle very easily, beating them in 5 games. And in the finals, the Rockets would be matched up against the New York Knicks, led by Patrick Ewing. And Ewing and Hakeem, they actually had kind of a rivalry dating back to college, as Ewing's Georgetown Hoyas, they had beat Hakeem's Houston Cougars in the 1984 NCAA Championship. So I think that gave Hakeem a little added motivation to get back at Patrick Ewing for stealing a championship from him in college. And Hakeem, he was great through the first 5 games of that series, but the Rockets, they would find themselves down 3-2, heading back to Houston in a do-or-die Game 6. And a common thing with Hakeem, he always shows up in the big games. In this do-or-die Game 6, he would have 30 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists, and he would have the game-saving block on John Starks, as Starks attempted to shoot a game-winning 3. And while this block was so crucial, John Starks, he was absolutely on fire this game, having 27 points and knocking down 5 3-pointers. So that block, it very well could have saved the Rockets championship, and it's a crucial big-time play that gets overlooked when talking about Hakeem. In this Game 7 of the finals, we have 25, 10, 7, and 3, as the Rockets, they would knock off the New York Knicks and win the NBA championship. And if you do a quick side-by-side comparison of Hakeem versus Ewing, Hakeem, he absolutely dominated Patrick Ewing, but the thing that's more interesting is how Ewing performed in the first 3 rounds of the playoffs compared to how he performed in the NBA Finals. You can definitely see the effect Hakeem and the Rockets defense had on him, as his production and efficiency, it definitely fell off in the NBA Finals, and that is a big reason the Rockets were able to win the championship. And if you look at Hakeem's playoff summary, he averaged 29 points per game, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 blocks, and nearly 2 steals. And he became the first player ever in NBA history to lead his team in all 5 major stat categories, and he did that with no other All-NBA teammates. So definitely a notable accomplishment that makes his championship all that more special. And if you look at Hakeem's elimination game stats and his Game 7 stats, they're absolutely off the charts. And I think Hakeem, he is kind of underrated when it comes to being a big-time game performer. As you can clearly see, he steps up when it matters most, and he definitely did that in the 1984 playoffs. And for me personally, I think Hakeem's 94 season, it is the best season of all time, taking into account everything, him winning MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, the NBA Championship, and winning Finals MVP, and how he performed in the big games. I think taking all that into account, that makes Hakeem's 1994 season the best season in NBA history. Now, in sports, you always hear the phrase championship hangover, and that refers to teams riding high off their past championship and not really coming prepared the very next year, and that was definitely the case for the 95 Rockets, as they started the season 29-17, and midway through the year, they were definitely looking to make a move, and when Clyde Drexler became available, Houston definitely hopped on the opportunity to get an all-star caliber player. Now you think with the Rockets struggling, all the players in the Rockets who didn't get traded, they would be happy that Clyde Drexler, that he was coming in to give them an added boost to make them a better team, but that was really not the case. There was a lot of clashing in the locker room between players not wanting Clyde to be there, and the chemistry in general, it was just off from the moment Drexler got there. Now, with Clyde in the lineup, the Rockets, they would finish the year 17-18, and they would finish at the 6th seed in the Western Conference. Now, with Houston being such a low seed, they're matched up against the 16-22 Utah Jazz, and the Jazz, they were heavy favorites, as no one expected Houston to make a deep playoff run, and after the first 3 games, everything was going according to plan, as the Jazz were up 2-1, but over those last 2 games of that series, Hakeem was absolutely phenomenal, averaging 37 points per game, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, while shooting 63% from the field, and he outplayed Karl Malone, who finished 3rd in the MVP voting. Now, in the second round, the Rockets will be matched up against the 59-23 Suns, led once again by Charles Barkley. In this series, it is the forgotten 3-1 comeback, as Houston, they would go down 3-1, and over the last 3 games of that series, Hakeem played out of his mind, averaging 30 points per game, 12 rebounds, 6 assists, and 2.3 blocks, as well as 1 steal, and Houston would advance to the Western Conference Finals to play 62-20 San Antonio Spurs. Now, as I said before, in the 1994 Finals, Hakeem had added motivation going against Patrick Ewing, since he lost the NCAA championship to him 10 years prior, but this year in 1995, Hakeem, he would have more fuel to the fire, as David Robinson, he had won MVP over Hakeem, and Hakeem, he thought he was the best player in the world and that he deserved the MVP award. Now, David Robinson winning this MVP, that's probably the worst thing that ever happened in his career, because Hakeem, he would put on an absolute clinic, destroying David Robinson on both ends of the court, and ultimately, the Rockets, they would beat the San Antonio Spurs in 6 games and advance back to the NBA Finals. Now, in the Finals is a very interesting matchup, as the veteran Rockets were matched up against the young and up-and-coming Orlando Magic, who had just knocked off Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls. Now, Game 1 is by far the most exciting game of this series, as the Magic at one point were up by 20 points, but Houston, they would claw and scratch their way back, and would actually force overtime. And this is the infamous Nick Anderson free throw game, where he missed 4 straight free throws that would have sealed and iced Game 1 and given the Magic a victory. Now, with Nick Anderson choking the line, that opened up the opportunity for the Rockets to steal Game 1, and they did exactly that, as Kenny Smith had some timely threes to force overtime, and in overtime, Hakeem Olajuwon would have the game-winning tip-back that would give the Rockets a Game 1 victory. And in that Game 1, the Magic definitely showed their lack of maturity, and Houston, on the other hand, they showed their veteran mentality of never giving up and always coming out big in the clutch, and that would be a theme of this series, as Houston, they would sweep the Magic and win back-to-back championships, and Hakeem would outplay young Shaq, who finished second MVP voting that very season. Now, this 1995 playoff run, it is the most difficult playoff run of all time if you rank it off win percentage of team opponents, and the Rockets, they actually beat the 4 best teams in the NBA, which is a very impressive feat, and it hasn't been done since. And during this run, Hakeem faced some legendary big man competition: Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, Dennis Rodman, David Robinson, and Shaquille O'Neal, and he outplayed all of them. The level of difficulty and the adversity the Rockets faced in the 95 playoffs, it really has not been seen before or since, and this is by far the toughest road to a championship, and more specifically for Hakeem, this is the toughest competition you'll ever see for a player at the center position, facing all of his rivals and taking all of them down en route to a championship. And another underrated aspect of Hakeem's game is how good of a scorer he was. If you look at the highest points per game average in a title run, Hakeem ranks 3rd, only behind Michael Jordan. And if you look at the most points ever scored in the playoff run, Hakeem ranks 4th, only behind Jordan, LeBron, and Kawhi. Now, that's kind of where the story of Hakeem Olajuwon ends, as after that season, Hakeem would never reach the NBA Finals again. They would come close in 1987, but John Stockton, he would get his revenge and hit a game winner that would send the Utah Jazz back to the NBA Finals. And after 98, Hakeem just was never healthy again, and he could never get back to that all-NBA player level, and it was a slow, steady decline until he retired in 2002 with the Toronto Raptors. Now, I just want to go revisit the 94 and 95 seasons. Hakeem, during both those years combined, he won the MVP and Defensive Player of the Year, both those coming in the same season. He was a 2-time NBA champion and a 2-time Finals MVP, winning both those back-to-back, becoming one of only 6 players to ever win back-to-back Finals MVPs. During this stretch, he beat 4 teams that won 55-plus games and beat 2 teams that won over 60 games. In 94, he won with no All-NBA talent, and he led the team in all 5 major stat categories and the biggest carry job in NBA history. And in 95, as I said before, he had the toughest road to a championship that anyone's ever seen, and he beat the best competition at his position to win the title. Now, in my opinion, Hakeem Olajuwon, he is the most skilled big man of all time, and I do think he is the best center to ever play the game. He really is one of the best two-way players, if not the best two-way player to ever play the game. And I really do hope this video, it shows you guys why I think Hakeem Olajuwon, he really needs to be talked about more, and the dream, he cannot be slept on any longer. And if you do know someone who is still sleeping on Hakeem, I think you should show them this video, because after watching this, they would definitely not be sleeping on Hakeem, and they'll probably rank him higher on their all-time list. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching this video, and if you did like this video a lot, make sure to recommend it to Hakeem fans, or anyone who is still sleeping on Hakeem Olajuwon. So thank you guys for watching, I'll see you guys next time.